here with more on today's hearing. He was going hard at the Secretary of State, Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, let me begin with you. They didn't see it. Now, Senator, I keep running this map, and it's a time-lapse map, and it shows the Taliban on the march all the way through March and April and May and June. They had 60% of the country, and Joe Biden was still bragging about one of the best-trained militaries ever, that being the Afghan military that was collapsing the entire time.
Yeah, so first of all, let me tell you, Sean, they can spin that to a lot of different people. They can't spin that to me because I spend hours every week, as my job as the vice chairman of the Intelligence Committee, reviewing the exact same intelligence that the State Department had, that the White House had, and I went through it again earlier this week just to make sure that I wasn't mistaken in my memory. Anyone who was reading consistently the reporting and the analysis for the better part of 3 to 4 months and didn't conclude that, in fact, this could unravel very quickly, either A, doesn't know how to analyze this stuff and does not belong in that position, or B, willfully ignored it because they wanted to reach an artificial timeline for political purposes. They wanted to have a big ceremony on September 11th and brag about getting out of the war, and now they're lying about it. They can't lie to me about it, and what he said today and what they continue to say is categorically false. They either knew or they should have known, and either one is bad. They're either incompetent or they're lying about it now.
Okay, so I want to be clear, because the American people need to know. In April, they knew, they were warned. The intelligence did not fail the American people. They knew in May, they knew in June, they knew in July. When Joe Biden said the Afghan army, it's not inevitable for the Taliban to take over, by that time, we knew the Afghan military was failing and the Taliban was on the march, and they were taking over larger and larger geographical portions quickly in Afghanistan. We knew all of that. Right. So he knew all of that.
Yeah, so what they knew by June 8th, when Joe Biden held a press conference where he had this sort of, July 8th, when he stood up and sort of argued in this naive optimism about the state of the Afghan military, he knew that they had had the worst fighting season since the start of the conflict 20 years ago. He knew that they were slowly and methodically isolating Kabul, cutting off all its supply lanes. He knew that because the airstrikes had ended, the Taliban was not able to mass 5,000 to 6,000 fighters outside of major cities. You could see the writing of the wall. You could see what direction this was going, and it was pretty clear. They were warned repeatedly that this could spiral very quickly and without warning, and they ignored it because he wanted a big signing. He wanted a big ceremony on September 11th to brag about how he got us out of the war on the 20th anniversary. And that's what he did. And his artificial timeline and the reality of the real world did not match up. And what we have now is this catastrophe, which has humiliated our country. And by the way, not just left behind American citizens, but green card holders. Permanent residents of the United States are stuck in Afghanistan tonight and may die because of this incompetent administration.
And they're held hostage. I want to go to this letter that you have written to the President of the United States as it relates to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, and the reports out of Bob Woodward's book that, in fact, he worked to actively undermine a sitting commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces and contemplated a treasonous leak of classified information to the Chinese Communist Party in advance of a potential armed conflict with the People's Republic of China. These actions demonstrate a clear lack of sound judgment. I urge you to dismiss him immediately. And then also add to that from the book that Milley protected nuclear weapons from being launched by Donald Trump. Can we talk about how deeply implications are in this? Now, you referred to a lot of this in your letter to President Biden.
Well, first of all, anybody who knew Donald Trump and President Trump or worked around him knows that the notion that he was going to start a war at anywhere in the world unnecessarily is just not realistic. That's not. He was the opposite. He wanted to avoid these conflicts, and he talked about it openly. That's number one. Number two, I want everybody to understand. Look, you don't have to like Donald Trump to be concerned about this. Okay? You have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a military leader, basically ignoring the Constitution, deciding he's going to call a potential adversary and an enemy of the United States and collude with them and tell them, if I'm ever ordered to do something, I'm going to tell you about it first, and also break the chain of command when it comes to the nuclear codes of this country and its control. I honestly hope that tomorrow we're going to have a statement from General Milley saying this is an absolute lie, this never happened, because the alternative is we basically now live in a country where a general can decide, I don't like what a president's doing, I don't think a president is in his right mind, I'm going to ignore his warning, and I'm going to collude with our potential enemies to prevent our president, elected by the people, from taking action, which, by the way, in this case, there's no sign that that action he was trying to prevent was ever going to happen. Imagine if tomorrow General Milley decides, I think Joe Biden is senile. And so, you know what? I'm not going to follow his orders. I'm going to collude with Russia and China to prevent us from acting. Or a future president. I don't think he's in his right mind either, because it is the essence, a military coup, for lack of a better term. That's what it would equate to.
So would it be court-martial, insubordination, aid and comfort to the enemy, maybe even treason, if in fact he offered to aid an enemy of the United States?
I don't think there's any doubt that at a minimum he should be fired if this is true. Now, I hope it's not true. I really do, for the sake of our country. I hope that it's not true. But if it is, if he had actually done this,
is it possible?
I hope. I don't know I don't know Bob Woodward. I don't know anything about it. I hope for the sake of our country that this is not true, and we'll get a strong denial, because the alternative basically means that we have the person in charge of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is someone who decided that he was more important than the Constitution, more important than the chain of command, that he unilaterally was going to make a determination about colluding with a potential enemy of the United States.
What do we do in a situation if it's he said versus he said here? He denies it. Woodward says, yeah, it happened.
Well, that story came from somewhere. So I think at that point, Woodward would then be compelled to produce the evidence that he has about whether it happened or not happened. I think at that point, Woodward would have to come forward and show it. Look, I really hope it's not true, because if it is, that is one of the most serious breaches of constitutional order that I have seen, that I don't think any of us have ever seen in modern American history.